Good afternoon. I hope everyone has had a good weekend. Welcome back to Night TV. It's not that I want you here. It's not the way you say it to my eyes. I dare not skate past the fact that February is Black History Month. So let me offer a personal round of applause to those who came before me, who have made so many great contributions to the world as we know it today. Happy Black History Month to those who celebrate, and we're going to move on. Today's Death on a Dirt Road feature will be that of Courtney Thompson and Robert Guinyard Jr. I want to say that this case is personally disturbing due to the age of the victim and the facts within. So just understand that this is a heavy one. I want you guys to know that there is a trigger warning placed on this case because it's getting too much. At approximately 6:15 p.m. on July 1st, 2013, Richland County Medical Services received a call for an ambulance to the home of Courtney Thompson and Robert Guinyard Sr. Once they arrived, they found 4-year-old Robert Guinyard Jr. lying on the floor face down, apparently suffering from cardiac arrest. He was wearing jeans with no shirt. The toddler was not moving or breathing. He was cold to the touch, which means that he had been dead for quite some time before they even called for help. Paramedics checked little Robert's heart for electrical activity, but tragically, none could be found. Subsequently, Richland County investigators found the victim's blood on a living room wall, the hallway, a rear bedroom, and even on a metal pipe, which also turned out to have the father's blood on it as well. Courtney Thompson told investigators that she had given birth to another child just 2 days beforehand, and once she was discharged, she came home and found that little Robert had wet the playroom floor. She also stated that little Robert was autistic and that he would sometimes wet and soil the areas around him. She stated she had gotten in the shower, and once she was in there, she heard a loud boom. She went on to say that she rushed out of the shower and went to the playroom, and she found little Robert lying on the floor with his feet towards the dresser. He was crunched up and his body was stiff, she continued, and his butt was in the air. She also stated that he was biting his lip really hard. So once she pulled his lip from out of his teeth so that he wouldn't bite it off, she stated that he went flat on her. He just fell and was not responding anymore. She then picked him up like a baby, taking him to the living room. She had blood on her hand, according to her, and blood was coming from his lip. She dialed 911, and 911 told her how to do CPR on the little boy. I did what he told me, Courtney stated. She also said that when the ambulance got there, they only put something on his chest, something that I can only assume was an EKG, but she stated that it was something and that they did nothing else. They only said that he was gone. Robert Guinyard Sr. then gave a false statement to the police. He stated that he was cooking dinner at the time of the supposed fall, and that he saw Courtney come down the hallway with little Robert in her arms, and that he hid in the closet once the investigators arrived and the ambulance arrived because he feared that they would take the new baby away. But all he heard was a boom. He was nowhere around when little Robert's incident happened. Next day, so on July 2nd, 2013, a forensic pathologist by the name of Amy Dorso performed a autopsy on little Robert and stated that she found hemorrhaging and soft tissue bleeding. She also found different injuries in various states of healing due to non-accidental trauma. Later that day, investigators went over the autopsy results with Courtney, who then turned around and stated that her initial statement had not been true. She retracted her first statement and stated that when she came home from the hospital, she found her son naked and lying in a puddle of urine. He was crying like he was in pain and drinking water like he hadn't had any in days. She went on to say that he was breathing funny. She stood him up and he just collapsed. She found him crying in her room. She stated that Robert Jr. told her that he had been beaten with a pole when she was in the hospital, and that she saw all the blood flecks on the various things inside of the house. Things that I have mentioned before, like the living room wall, the rear bedroom. So he was not just beaten in one room. It seems like this was a prolonged beating that caused Robert to be in the state that he was in once Courtney had found him. After that admission, she and Robert Sr. were arrested and charged with homicide by child abuse, as well as unlawful conduct towards a child. It is important to note that Elizabeth Struth, the former director of the Department of Social Services, stepped down after just a year in office after the death of Robert Guinyard Jr. She has stepped into the middle of a firestorm, meaning that the person who held the office before her had left behind a job that was just too big for the staffing that Richland County Social Services had at that time. So she was on the job a little over 3 months at the time of Robert Guinyard Jr.'s death, and she walked into a firestorm of criticism because there have been many pleas for help on the behalf of this young man, and DSS ignored it. And the public and those in office felt like, had she done something to fix this, although this woman had only been in office for a little over 3 months, in their minds, she needed to have cleaned it up, and that death should have never happened. And I just don't know how they felt like she would have gotten acclimated to that position within that short amount of time. But whatever the case, all of the criticism fell on her and her handling of these cases in that office, and she stepped down. Family members and friends testified during the trial that they had begged DSS for help, but no one came to their aid. So this will be a pattern, because Robert Guinyard's death was just one of many under Lillian Kohler, the former director of DSS, who was appointed by Nikki Haley in 2011. If you don't know who Nikki Haley is, she's the former governor of the state of South Carolina, right before the current governor that we have now. DSS spokesperson Marilyn Matthews said that Stroop would be returning to York County to take a different position, but will remain in office until her successor was chosen. So she was good enough to remain in office until someone else came along and took over and really just picked up the lack of the last people who had came before her, just like Stroop did. So really these people are being railroaded into taking on a broken system that nobody seems to see the needs to fix. It's almost like it is reactive and not proactive. On July 5th, 2013, Robert's paternal grandmother, who is Robert Sr.'s mother, asked to be accompanied to the house to find some clothing for the newborn baby as well as Robert Sr. She was digging through a large pile of clothes when she came across a child size 5 shirt that was still wet with blood. It was subsequently taken to the lab and determined to be the victim's blood. Courtney Thompson and Robert Guinyard Sr. were tried together the next year on May 19th through the 28th, 2014. Dr. Olga Rosa, a forensic pediatrician, testified about the horrors of the autopsy results as well as little Robert's genetic development and everything else that went along with that. She also stated that he had been placed in foster care in 2009 when he was only 2 months old and had only been returned to his parents in 2012, so the previous year. Dr. Rosa stated that after some initial setbacks when he was first placed in foster care, the young man thrived in foster care and that he was not autistic. He had only failed in autism screening because he was having some speech difficulties at the time, which is common for children in foster care. He stated that his growth parameters were great. He was speaking in complete sentences, 1 to 2 word sentences. He was socializing. He was interacting. There was nothing wrong with him except for the fact that he should never have been returned to his parents. As soon as he was returned to his parents in 2012, he started regressing. So all of that progress had gone out of the window, which suggests that the abuse had began early on. Children are a blank slate. They don't know to be afraid of you unless you give them a reason to know to be afraid of you. So all of that regression came presumably at the time that Courtney and Robert started abusing the poor little thing. Denise Jones, Robert's previous foster mother, stated that she had spoken to Courtney on the phone just a few days beforehand, and Courtney stated to her that little Robert would not use the bathroom. Denise was perplexed by this because she was saying he was using the bathroom fine while he was with her, and she also told Courtney to let her know if she needed any help. Similarly, Dr. Monica McCutcheon, who saw little Robert in 2012 for his 3-year-old checkup, stated that she heard from Courtney that Robert was not using the bathroom, that he was having issues with wetting and soiling himself, and she complained that his speech was not as good as his 2-year-old siblings. 2 of Courtney's sisters, Natalie and Maria, stated that except for a couple of weeks when little Robert lived with Maria, he lived with Courtney and Robert Sr. up until the time of his death. Maria had taken Robert into her home because Courtney had vented that she was sick and tired of him wetting and soiling himself. She stated that she had witnessed Courtney on several occasions beating little Robert and that she had taken pictures for DSS to see. Now, here is my issue with that. I was going to hold off until the end, but like I stated in one other case, I cannot stand when adults stand by and witness some things and they hold things until the end. At what point are you going to stop this from happening? Why was he returned to Courtney and Robert if you know that he is being beaten and abused? I'm not blaming anyone in this case except for Courtney and Robert. Let me be clear about that. But it just really perplexes me that adults can stand by and see a helpless child and the only thing that they can do is to take photos. You're just going to have to be mad at me. Because I'm going to tell. And not only am I going to tell, I'm going to remove that child out of your custody. Because apparently you don't have the wherewithal and the mental capacity to take care of a 3-year-old child and know that sometimes they do wet themselves. You are accusing this little boy of being autistic when a forensic pediatrician already stated that there was nothing autistic about him. He was afraid of his parents. Natalie stated that Courtney told her she wanted little Robert to go back to DSS so that they can give him a beating and a raping, whatever that means. She stated that she had seen Robert Sr. hitting the child, but only in the way a father should, like hitting him in the back of the head to straighten him up for some whatever behavior he was doing at the time. So apparently that was acceptable to them. The fact that he was hitting the baby in the back of the head, because that's the way that a father should. Natalie also recounted tales of little Robert being deprived of food and that he had to be careful not to be caught eating by either of his parents. Angela Metz, the grandmother of little Robert's half-sister, stated that she had seen him shortly after he had been returned from DSS and that he was happy and well-adjusted. She then went on to say, over the course of the year, she also saw little Robert's regression and that he had lost a significant amount of weight and that he had stopped talking. In February of 2013, so the same year before he died, Metz also stated that she received photographs of bruises and scratches on the little boy's back and that she had called DSS and reported it to ensure that it would not happen again. Thank you, Ms. Metz, for taking some action. Another sister of Courtney's, Crystal, stated that she lived with Courtney and Robert Sr. from April 2012 to October 2012. And she recalled times where Courtney would ask her to hold little Robert's leg so that she could whoop him. Crystal refused to do so and she left. She also witnessed Robert Sr. punching Robert Jr., making him sit on the toilet for upwards of 3 hours for wetting and soiling himself. So you guys are seeing a pattern here. The little boy was incontinent, and it wasn't for no reason, because he was not that way once he was in foster care. This started to happen once he had been returned to his parents. Crystal also recounted how on one occasion, Courtney stated she did not care if the little retarded bastard died, and that she hoped that DSS would come and get him. And if she killed him, she was going to bury him so that they would not take her other baby away. Crystal also stated that she had been on the phone with Courtney on July 1st, 2013, so the day of little Robert's death. And this occurred at 5:05 p.m., so about an hour before the 911 call went out. They ended that call because Courtney stated that she was going to get in the shower. But Courtney's phone subsequently dialed Crystal back, and she did not know that her sister was still on the phone. And she could hear little Robert being beat and Courtney telling him to hush. After that, she ended the call. Sadly, she also heard little Robert crying, "Lord, help me." Y'all, that one hit me right in the feels. To know that this little 4-year-old baby was crying out to the Lord for help because his demon parents were beating him that way. And if his aunt had never inadvertently called that phone back, no one would have known that detail. But that just grips my heart to know that this baby had the presence of mind to call on the Lord because his parents were doing just the absolute worst that they could do to him. Just so we are absolutely clear about the amount of injuries this baby had, I'm going to read off every single thing that they found during the autopsy. Dr. Dorso testified that during the victim's autopsy, her external examination revealed several scars over victim's head, orbital contusions, aka black eyes, lacerations to his lips, deep injuries on the inside of his lower lip, several scars on his arms, several abrasions on his torso, buttocks, and lower legs, a healing bite mark on his back, which based on the size of the mark was inflicted by a teen or adult, and a swollen knee. Dr. Dorso's internal examination revealed a pale thyroid gland, which indicated heavy blood loss, 2 rib fractures, one occurring between 10 days and 6 weeks prior to victim's death, and the other occurring within 24 hours prior to death, and a healing fracture to his upper left arm, 1 to 2 weeks old, overlaid with an acute hemorrhage indicating a site of repeated injury. Did you guys hear all of that? This was a 4-year-old child. But out of all of that, as if that was not horrific enough, who bit this baby on the back? Because as you stated, the bite was big enough to have been inflicted by a teen or adult. What teenagers were in the house? Additional injuries revealed, as if that was not enough, in the internal examination were multiple bruises to victim's head, an indicator of abuse, a subdural hemorrhage indicating a significant blunt force impact and dating from 5 to 7 days prior to death, and profuse bleeding and hemorrhage in the soft tissues of victim's lower back, possibly where he was bitten, his buttocks, the back of his legs, and the back of his arms, which confirms suspected multiple bruises Dr. Durso noticed in these areas during the external examination. The soft tissue injuries with bright red or dark hemorrhaging were probably less than 18 to 24 hours old, and the injuries with yellow hemorrhaging were older and could not be dated. Dr. Durso explained that the combined new and old soft tissue hemorrhaging contributed to the blood loss of little Robert. So he was no longer able to circulate enough blood to give oxygen when needed to his brain to maintain his vital functions of his body. Little Robert's arm was broken, so he had lost function of that arm, and he had been guarding it closely during the beating that he had endured on the day of his death. I cannot imagine, as an adult, I cannot imagine bearing that just amount of pain. Like, how evil do you have to be to do this to a child, much less any other living, breathing human being? Also stated that the subdural hemorrhage would have caused enough pressure on little Robert's brain to cause him to be lethargic, to start vomiting, and to even lose consciousness at the time of the blow. So it's possible that once this injury, that blunt force injury, had occurred, he had lost consciousness. So he was already near death, possibly during those 5 to 7 days before this even happened. Dr. Durso stated that the injuries had been intentional and that the victim had to have been in intense and chronic pain. He was chronically abused, and anyone who had come into contact with little Robert would have seen that he was in an intense amount of pain, which just angers me to no end, because how many adults stated that they witnessed all of this going on, that they had been in and out of that house, that they had seen the systematic abuse, and nobody stopped it. The only person who came close to doing so was the grandmother of the half-sister of little Robert, who did tell a pediatrician, who did in turn call DSS, and we know what DSS did. Dr. Rosa finished with telling the court that the abuse inflicted on little Robert during the last 2 months of his life is what ultimately caused his death. Anyone on the street, anyone coming into the home would have noticed that little Robert needed medical attention. And if he had been taken to a doctor anywhere, he possibly could have been saved. But we know that this was not the case. He suffered in silence. He was in that home. Everyone came in and out. They witnessed all of this. And instead of doing anything for him, despite the 2 weeks that he was with his aunt, he was returned back to that house each and every time by DSS, by family members, by everyone. I am really having trouble figuring out who is more responsible in this case. I understand that the parents were the abusers, and that had they not started any of this, there would be no need to see something, say something. I understand. I get all of that. But I feel like if you are a bystander, if you are a witness to any of this, especially a 4-year-old child, you have a responsibility as an adult, hell, as a human being. You have a responsibility to do something to save this child. Once again, I'm not blaming anyone else instead of the disgusting parents who did this to this child. But I am stating there is absolutely no way. I don't care if you never speak to me again in my life. I am not going to witness that sort of chronic abuse. And I'm sure a lot of you out there would say the same. You are not going to be a witness to that sort of chronic abuse and not say anything. Absolutely not. Needless to say, or maybe it is a need to say, that both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is where I come in my introduction of Courtney Thompson. I have never met Robert Guinyard, don't care to, but I have met Courtney Thompson, and I was shocked to know that, and you know what, never mind, shock is not a good word, because I have seen these brazen criminals do this over and over again. They will appeal on the smallest thing that they will say that the trial court erred in a last-ditch effort to get themselves out of the trouble that they have undoubtedly created for themselves. I get it. You have a life to save. It sounds to me as though Courtney was really the catalyst to all of this, that Robert kind of followed in her footsteps, that he really didn't abuse little Robert as much as Courtney did, but that his issue was that he did not say anything. He did not stop her from doing these things. And sure, I'm sure that he did hit him. I'm sure that his aunt did see him punch him and make him sit on the toilet for 3 hours. But I just feel like it was encouraged by Courtney for all of this to happen, because who said to one, oh, we're going to beat this one, and they just okay with it? Like, somebody has to have some sort of common sense. If I have a child with somebody and I see them beating my child, you best believe we're going to have a problem. I understand disciplining them. I was disciplined as a child. But I do believe that there are better ways to handle the disciplining of children. I do believe that. You know, as an adult, I'm not saying spare the rod and however you choose to discipline, why do you have to beat them to excess? Why do you have to beat them to the point where they have all of these injuries and all of these lifelong issues to the point that they are incontinent? I just do not agree with that. And I feel like if you hit a child out of frustration, especially a toddler, these are the results that you're going to end up with, especially if you cannot control your temper. So who at some point stated, this is wrong. We don't need to be doing this. And it sounds like they were trying to give Robert a break and state that, you know, he wasn't possibly the mastermind behind it, but he never stopped it. But he wasn't hitting little Robert as much as Courtney. I don't care. I don't care if he tapped him on the behind. The fact is, sir, that you watched her do this and you did not stop her. You had no issue with it because y'all could not control the fact that y'all's son was now incontinent and he was wetting and soiling himself. Why do you think he was doing that? Because he was deathly afraid of y'all. If I was walking around and somebody was inflicting these sorts of injuries on me on a daily basis, then you best believe that something is going to come out of that. You're going to see some kind of external evidence that I am afraid. But what gets me is that when he went out in public, look at this photo. Look how well dressed he is. It's not that they were showing the world that they didn't care about him. No, they put on the front whenever he left the home. Whenever they had to include him in anything, you would never have known. Unless you came in that house during those last 2 months of his life and you started seeing those injuries and those things that just could not be hidden anymore. But they knew what they were doing and they knew to hide it. And to the Department of Social Services and anybody who was in control of this case, ever came across this case, ever had any kind of hands in this case, all of you should be ashamed of yourselves because you are just as culpable. There is no way that you have a job doing this very thing to be protecting children and you did nothing in this case. How did this little boy end up dead? How did anybody say, well, they're rehabilitated enough, let me go ahead and send him home? How? There is absolutely no way. Because if DSS was called on a number of occasions, especially on a child who had already been taken from his parents' custody, nobody thought, let me go by this house and do a visit. He had been taken away at 2 months old and returned in 2012. So that means he was 3 years old. So in a 3-year span, this little boy was doing great. He was progressing. And as soon as he got there, he was regressing. So somebody did try to call DSS and tell them about the horrific things that were going on under that roof. But DSS said, you know what, we got other things to do. You know, we did the family unification thing. Let them work it out. That's what it sounds like. You guys are just as guilty of murder as his parents are. Because why not? Why not go and check on these children? Whose job is it? Why is it passed down? It's not like some kind of thing that you can put off to the next person. This is physical, mental, and emotional abuse, DSS. The system failed, Robert, said one prosecutor. Sir, that is the understatement of this and the last century. Robert Guinyard Sr. had the nerve to say, I am an innocent man. I can't do much. Have mercy on me. Who had mercy on your son, sir? You got everything you deserve. And so did Courtney. And you know what? I'm not here to play judge, jury, and executioner. But it's cases like this that just make me angry. Because that baby fell through the cracks. And I think for me, it's the fact that he stated, Lord, help me. He had the presence of mind to cry out to the Lord in his hour of need. And you know what? The Lord didn't help him the way that we thought that he should have helped him. The Lord didn't physically help him at that moment. But he came to swoop him up and to get him and to take him home to be with him because life on earth was never going to be good for that baby. He had, at least 14 more years before he could leave that house on his own legally. Imagine him going through all of that for all of that time. So the Lord did help him. And I'm glad that he knew the Lord as his personal savior. Whoo, child. So what were my thoughts on Courtney Thompson? I don't have an issue with Courtney. I never did have an issue with her. She has never in her whole entire life disrespected me. Courtney can be a bit of a disciplinary problem, and once again, that is an understatement. She is a disciplinary problem. She has girls fighting over her. She has a lot going on behind those walls. But one thing I can say, when it came to me, if I needed to talk to Courtney, if I needed to calm her down, she would listen to me with a level head. But Courtney knows who to play with. It's people who don't know how to approach her and how to speak to her on her level that she goes and she disrespects. Because I've witnessed her on many different occasions doing those things. She was on lockup for a good bit of the time when she first arrived. And I was working down there. And I noticed that when she's by herself, when she's just self-reflecting, Courtney is a different person. But once she gets into a crowd, once she realizes that she is being accepted by the crowd, then that is where you're going to get the issues out of Courtney. I find it absolutely despicable what she did to this baby. But once again, I'm not here to play judge, jury, and executioner. I can only give my opinion, and I have given it throughout this video. My opinions on Courtney as a person is Courtney has some things to work on like the rest of us. She's not like your average because she went and she beat the mess out of her 4-year-old. So, I mean, that right there, that already takes her on a different scale as far as I am concerned. But personally, just, face to face, I don't have any issues with Courtney. I think she has the potential to be a really nice girl, but up there, something is definitely messed up. The way that she flips, just, out of nowhere, she will flip. I have seen that as well. She will also have emotional breakdowns. She stated that she sees her baby when she closes her eyes, but she also claimed that she did not kill her baby. And she stated that in court. But as we know, those statements have changed on a number of different occasions. So really, you do not know what to believe. Nobody was there but the Guinyards, the Thompsons. Nobody was there at the time except them. Only Courtney, Robert Sr., and Robert Jr. knows what occurred. And whoever... any of the other children that were there, because they do have a number of children, a large number of children at that. So we don't know, and I'm not here to judge, and I'm sorry about any flashing that you guys may see. Cars are going past, but that is my thoughts on Courtney Thompson as an individual. Once again, I don't have a problem with her. I think that she has the potential to be a great person, but she needs some help mentally. She might even need an exorcism after me researching and going over this story, because this one really, it really boiled my blood. I mean, just from start to finish, the number of people who just allowed this to happen. But I'm not going to get back on that. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Death on a Dirt Road. I want to thank you so much for coming here to watch Night TV. Once again, happy Black History Month, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Do me a favor, guys. Hug your children a little closer tonight. Things like this have to stop happening.